Who is most in danger? Who needs to prepare the most? I know we talk about what FEMA says. FEMA says that you should have food and water for your family. Mandatory at least 3 days. Everyone should have that no matter where they are, but they're recommending now weeks of food in your home. But we're going to talk about who needs it the most. And that's important because certain places, certain people are going to need food more. They're going to need more stockpiles and be more prepared. And we're going to give you kind of a checklist. Does this apply to you? Are you one of the people that's most at risk? And we're going to talk about like basic things that you can do to get prepared. A simple checklist. I'm not going to throw out products to you. I'm going to talk about kinds of food and kinds of things to be prepared for. All right, let's jump into it. Welcome to the Poplar Report. I'm Steve Poplar. I'm an accountant by trade, and I think about these things a little bit. I read a little bit, and all that brings to the point that we can have a conversation together about who is at risk and what they can do about it. First off, if you are in a city or in suburbs, and unfortunately, that does describe a lot of people in the United States. If you're not in a small town surrounded by farms, if you don't personally know people who are producing a lot more food than what they eat, this means it's you. And while you may have a little backyard garden, while you may know neighbors who have a backyard garden, the simple fact is most people are purchasing more food than what they're selling. They're producing maybe a little bit of food, but then they're also purchasing food still. So what happens in a grid down situation? What happens when the Walmarts and the Albertsons and the Krogers stop having food in their stores? Well, there's going to be serious problems, and they're going to happen really fast. There could be an electrical interruption. And with electrical interruption, that means communications goes down. Maybe an EMP attack. Maybe an attack on our power grid. Maybe a hacking attack. There's lots of different scenarios where power could be a big issue and communications goes down, and that means all the trucks stop moving. That could happen. Or there could be a significant disruption in the food supply where food doesn't move around that way. Or maybe infrastructure gets damaged, whatever. Suddenly you go to the store and you find that it's been ransacked. People saw it getting low on food and they started panicking. They started grabbing whatever was on the shelves. Then they started grabbing the shelves. Then, quickly they start taking all the plasma TVs because that's a natural thing to do. I say it sarcastically, right? Anyway, so what can be done? I know a lot of people are going to say, well, you should have like buckets of seeds. You should have lots of seeds. But there's a problem with having seeds. One, do you have a garden? Because the problem with growing food is one of knowledge, it's of soil, and it's of having seeds. It's not just having seeds. If you don't have a developed area of your yard that is a garden, that you have developed soil, and also have you developed the skills and the knowledge to grow those things. I'm not saying don't have seeds, okay? Don't hear me saying that. But what I am saying is that if you don't know how to use those seeds and if you don't have all the things that go along with really gardening, that's not going to really necessarily help you out as much as you think it is. Because you look at the seeds and you go, oh, well, this little tomato seed is like, bushfuls of tomatoes. And then I can take the seeds out of those tomatoes and I can plant them in the ground. And I'll have like an abundant supply of tomatoes. When that's not exactly how it works. You plant like dozens and dozens of tomato seeds and you get like one plant and then some animal comes over and eats your plant. I mean, that's kind of more the experience that a lot of us have had, right? Growing food is hard. There are people who have dedicated their lives to learning how to grow food, and they use the most sophisticated technology and machinery to do so, and yes, they can be very efficient at doing it now. With all that technology, with all that knowledge, with knowledge passed down from generation to generation on how to do it properly, right? So don't think that you're good just because you have seeds. Not to mention, food storage is important. Why? Because you're storing energy, you're storing time, and it's guaranteed, right? As long as you don't have that food storage damaged in some way, that food is already harvested. It's not like a deer could come along and eat your stuff. Now, if a deer comes along to your garden to eat your stuff, you might want to, if there's no society, if there's no government at that point, well, then you can make that deer disappear into your freezer if you have one, or process it in some way. Always follow the laws, of course, folks. But if it's hunting season, you can do that, right? Anyway, so you have this whole issue here of storing energy, storing time. If you have food storage, you now have time to fiddle with the garden. Also think about this. If you start your garden and you're in suburbs or you're in the city, how long before all your neighbors come by and steal all of your food, right? It's a little easier to hide the food that's in your basement than it is to hide the food that's out in the garden, out in your backyard where everyone can see it, right? So you have to have those considerations as well. You can take buckets of food and bury them in your backyard. That makes them really hard to find for a lot of people, right? So there's those thoughts, right? So how can you just do this easily? And I know I'm covering the basics for some of you guys, but I'm going to drop some new stuff too and some advanced stuff along the way. But the simplest way to do it is whatever you have in your pantry, whatever food you normally eat that's shelf stable, move that up to about 2 to 3 months worth of food. Make it so that if the grocery store shuts down, you can just keep going and getting your spaghetti off the shelf, your spaghetti sauce or whatever you use to make all those things, your mac and cheese that's sitting in boxes on the shelf, or your popcorn and microwavable popcorn, or your stovetop popcorn, however you do your food, right? What kind of foods, canned and shelf-stable food, this is your pantry, right? Extend your pantry out to ideally 3 months. You should still be able to rotate everything sufficiently there. If you need to take some of it and put it downstairs and, or out in the garage, wherever it's still climate controlled sort of, and humidity controlled, you can rotate that every 3 months, and you now have 3 months worth of food in your home. Just buy extra every time you do, right? You can actually get canned goods to last a good bit longer than that usually. Canned goods can usually last 12 to 18 months depending on what the dates stamped on them are. Now, those are the Best Buy dates, okay? So if you're like a follow the rules Best Buy date kind of thing, notice it says Best Buy, it doesn't say expiration date, right? Expiration date for most canned goods is going to be basically infinity. They've opened up cans over 100 years old and they're still safe to eat. Now, it's not going to be as tasty. The texture is going to be a little weird. And some canned goods won't last that long because what's inside the can will actually eat away at the can. So if it's acidic, like tomato stuff, if it's like, pineapples or whatever, the can will eventually rust through. And once the seal is broken, that can is no good anymore. Of course, if you're opening up an older can, crack it open, take a sniff. If it smells really, really awful, don't eat it, okay? If you see mold when you open it up, that means the seal somehow got broken at some point. But generally speaking, canned goods will last indefinitely. If you got canned green beans, if you got canned beef stew, if you got canned meat, it's generally going to be good for forever, as long as you don't break the seals. And that is important when you stack cans on top of each other. If they got those little pull tab seals. They are much easier for the seal to get broken if you stack cans on top of each other without cardboard in between them and other protections. If you see how they stack them at the stores, they take some steps. They don't just put can upon can upon can, because that can punch through that seal. So if you want to expand your pantry beyond the 3 months, you can by just adding more canned goods. Just make sure that you're adding enough starches as well. And beyond 3 months for like pasta and flour and these kinds of things, you need to take some extra measures to make it so that they'll last that long. So like Mylar, you can do vacuum sealing. That will make pasta. If you get a vacuum sealer, you can vacuum seal pasta. But I do suggest strongly, if you do that, vacuum seal your pasta or whatever you're vacuum sealing, and then set it aside and wait like 3 or 4 days. and see if it just reinflates. If it reinflates, you didn't get a good seal. Okay, you can retry it. You can try to reseal it, or you can try sticking it inside another bag and sealing it again. But make sure you give it a couple days to make sure that the seal actually is good, because it'll look good right now, but especially with pokey things like pasta and stuff like that, sometimes it doesn't get a good seal, and it looks like it's good, but after a few days it's reinflated and it's not a good seal. But I strongly suggest actually doing a long-term food storage setup. One, because it's cheap. If you're buying canned goods, if you're buying your regular pantry stuff, if it's an emergency, it's okay for it to be emergency food. Rice and beans, that's the cheapest way to go. White rice, you can get lots of bulk 20-pounders at Walmart. That's one of the cheapest ways to get rice. There are some other ways you can get cheap rice. If you go to like Sam's Club and buy like a 40-pound bag, or or go to like a Chinese market and get like giant bags and stuff like that, you can get cheaper out there. Shop around, but baseline Walmart, everyone has that available to them. 20-pound bags of white rice, usually like $11 now for a 20-pounder, and then they have 20-pound bags of pinto beans at Walmart too. Sometimes you'll have to settle for the 8-pound bags. But anyway, 2 pounds of rice for every 1 pound of pinto beans. You say, Steve, I don't like rice and pinto beans. Friends, if you're starving, if you're having trouble with food, you will eat rice and pinto beans. Trust me. And that completes macronutrient, which is gives you basically the basic stuff that you need as a human being to survive. Rice and beans together make that up, and that's the cheapest way to go. Rice and pinto beans, put those in Mylar bags into 5-gallon buckets. That's what everyone will tell you how to do it. You can do Mylar bags sealed, and you can put them into totes. That's a cheaper way to go because 5-gallon buckets have gotten really expensive recently. The totes are not as durable, but you can seal up the totes, and then you can duct tape the edges to get a better seal on them. But the Mylar bags themselves actually produce the airtight seal that you need to keep those things fresh over a long period of time. Rice and pinto beans stored properly in Mylar and then inside an outer package to keep the Mylar intact will give you 20 to 30 and potentially even longer lifespan. 20 to 30 years lifespan. You can do this once and put that stuff away, and it'll be fine for a very long period of time. So you don't have to mess with it like a pantry. Once you get the pantry up to a certain level, it's not as good, right? Because you have to keep fiddling with it, and it takes a lot of time and energy and all that kind of stuff like that. And if you're into that, cool. But if you're doing your own canning, that makes more sense. But if you're just trying to just be prepared but not have to deal with it all the time, buckets or bins with Mylar inside, rice and beans. If you have rice and beans, I do recommend getting some big, they have like 7-pound jugs of chicken bouillon, like Knorr chicken bouillon, 7 pounds of it in a jug, plastic jug. You just buy some of those jugs. That way you can flavor your rice and beans and get some salt and some flavor in there. It doesn't do anything nutritional for you other than the salt. But in addition to that, you might want to get some canned meat for that. Canned ground beef like Keystone or Spam or some other kind of something to add to the kind of the flavor, make it a little nicer. Corned beef hash is good. Beef stew. You put that on rice. Oh, that's tasty. Think through that. Personally, I love Indian food, and so I have a lot of lentils, and I have the seasonings I need for making lentil curry, because lentil curry goes on rice, and lentils are basically the same profile as beans. So lentils with rice is the complete protein, and then you put some seasonings in there, and it tastes wonderful. It makes me happy. I like eating it anyway, but I have a whole bunch of those seasonings stockpiled. So if you're in the city or if you're in the suburbs, if you can see people's houses and people can see into your backyard, if you don't know people who produce more food than they eat, then that describes you. You are the most at risk. And unfortunately, that describes a lot of Americans. Less than 2% of Americans actually are involved in agriculture. Less than 2%. And when we start looking at cities and stuff like that, you're looking at well below 1%. In certain areas of the country, it's, a high proportion of the people are farmers. But when you're talking about the cities, a lot of people are not farmers. If you don't have a direct connection to somebody who produces food so that you can go work with them in order to earn your own food, you need to be seriously thinking about what you're going to do to make it through the hard times, or give yourself enough of a ramp so that you can start producing enough food, or so that you can find some place where you can work to earn your own food. I strongly suggest that most Americans need to be getting up to at least 1 year's food supply. I recommend three months of pantry. Expand your pantry for 3 months food, and then also get 9 months food storage stocked up for your family. That's not that terribly expensive. For about $250, you can get one person's 12 months beans, rice, bouillon, and then I think I had some like Spam or something like that. And I did the math before. There's a video. I'll link that video up here so that you can just click right through and walk through how much it will cost you, what you can get to stockpile that, if you haven't already thought about that. But hopefully that's a good pointer to help you think through how to be supplied, how to be stockpiled. And food that you stockpile can help other people too. So if things happen, we're all going to be starting our gardens really, really hard. Hopefully you've already started yours and you've been fiddling around with that the last couple of years. I have been. But the success has not been as good as I had hoped. I'm learning things by making mistakes, right? And that's annoying right now that I'm making mistakes and paying for them. But in a crisis, that would be the difference between life and death. And so with food storage, you have more opportunity to figure things out and move forward with that. All right, friends, I'm going to put that video right up here where you can just see me walk through what it would actually look like to have food storage and more specific recommendations with that. If you haven't already subscribed to this channel, please do. Just tap that button or the subscribe button down below to make sure you're subscribed, and hit that thumbs up to make sure this gets out to more people. Thanks so much for watching. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report, out.